Hello everybody, and welcome to Retrospective. My name's Alex, and you're watching episode 9. Of all the oddities in video games, few have the stigma and notoriety that this game does. It was masterfully advertised, showcasing a dark, emotional game of defeat, a game where nothing was designed to feel comfortable. There were going to be nuclear attacks, betrayal, torture, and no retribution. The only major hurdle in its path was the publisher, Konami. They became greedy and thought they could push the director around, and it resulted negatively for the title. What was quite possibly going to be one of the greatest games of the decade, nay, all time, fell short due to missing content and misplaced ideas. It was still an unfinished game shoved onto the market, with obvious missing content never to be finished. The game is Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, a confusing tale of forgotten promises and development issues, released in 2015. If my tone during the introduction wasn't evidence that I too was disappointed by this title, as many fans were, which I'll get onto in a minute, then it should be said that this game is a prime example of greedy publishers and development hell. Before the release of The Phantom Pain, a prequel/tech demo title was released under the name Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes a year prior. It was a short, sub-30-minute game retailed for the price of a full title, and this led to the first of the controversies of the Metal Gear Solid 5 name, something I'll return to. Ground Zeroes really showcased everything that was possible with a next-gen Metal Gear game. It looked great, introduced new features such as driving and hiding in vehicles, and built on ideas already established in the franchise, with big improvements to the already well-defined stealth mechanics the Metal Gear series is famous for. Following Big Boss, the protagonist from the 2005 title Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, and one of the overall antagonists for the earlier Metal Gear games, Ground Zeroes shows the events that transpired after the building of Mother Base, a seabound haven for soldiers without an army to fight for, or those who have lost the ideals of the countries they were fighting to protect, and before the building of Outer Heaven, a name that would become important in the later timeline. It takes place after Peace Walker, a PlayStation Portable title that was eventually ported to console with the release of the MGS HD collection, using characters and carrying over subplots from said title. The problem with this title is that while it functioned well, it wasn't really suitable for a full-fledged physical release, which, as I've said, was the first time something might be up behind the scenes at Konami. It should have really been tagged onto the start of The Phantom Pain, which it was eventually with the Game of the Year edition, as it's so important to the narrative of the main title that missing it would have serious ramifications to the impact of The Phantom Pain. Anyway, I digress. Ground Zeroes was controversy number 1, as I've said, and we'll be seeing more of those soon enough. Much like with Ground Zeroes, the problem with The Phantom Pain is that the game itself isn't that bad. Personally, I enjoyed some sections, but I have a very love-hate relationship with it. I love media that's upsetting, filled with regret, and well-written drama. In episode 8, I mentioned in passing that art with sad endings is usually regarded more highly within art cultures, and I believe that it's because it produces stronger emotions than happy endings, and MGS5 would have been sadness incarnate. It's literally a game about failure and suffering, but it fell short. Far too short. One of my major problems is that some areas of it are amazing, where some are just downright lazy and boring. But it functions well and has some solid set pieces, yet is missing some very key elements of the story, such as the ending, the proper ending, and various aspects intended to be used in-game that were removed without the build-up cutscenes and dialogue going along with it, leaving a disappointing, if not confusing, mismatch of dead-end story arcs and subplots. When The Phantom Pain hit store shelves, it gained widespread acclaim, with critics noting the masterful story writing and gameplay weaved together. But if you look at a fan site, the opinion is more realistic. They frequently mention the missing and cut content, repeat side missions, and lack of interesting bosses, and an ending purely designed to make Big Boss's return in MGS4 more tangible, which I'll get back to. The game's a tough one really. As mentioned, there were problems arising subtly since before The Phantom Pain came out. Mainly of rumours that the director, Hideo Kojima, father of the Metal Gear series, was being mistreated by Konami. These rumours were eventually confirmed, which resulted in the ending of a partnership between Kojima Productions and its publisher. Kojima himself was fired after the release of the Phantom Pain, and the Metal Gear franchise was left to rot. Save for the Metal Gear Survive game, I guess, which no one liked. Konami have affected the Metal Gear series before, by making Kojima create Snake Eater when he didn't want to, but that game is nearly a masterpiece, and it should have made sense to just let Kojima do whatever he wanted if it would result in another MGS3, or even 4, but instead they rushed him and forced him to split his game into 2, boiling the blood of consumers. This is the problem. While publishers think they understand the market, they don't understand it takes time and effort to create art, and also what goes into making a product that is serviceable. And in today's modern world, where big league reviews lack any meaningful criticism, publishers never see what their rushing of developers results in. But would they really care? An example of clearly rushed content is the lack of any obvious boss fights. Metal Gear is home to some super iconic fights. Liquid in MGS1, any of the final 3 bosses from Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, and Liquid Ocelot in MGS4. Then we have the skulls. These guys are just overpowered bullet sponges that appear far too often in the place of any realistic boss fights. The only boss fight I can remember is Quiet. One boss in a game as long and big as MGS5 just doesn't cut it. I know this may have been because MGS5 departs from the gamey feel for a more down-to-earth experience, but in the spirit of the series, boss fights should have been included. Another very controversial topic is the removal of the ending, or just the non-completion of it. The game was slated to have 3 acts, with the final tying up ends between Eli, who by the way is Liquid Snake, which of course was never really made apparent, and Big Boss. This would have explained all the nonsense characters like the Floating Boy, whom by the way was never stated as being Psycho Mantis, and Eli's apparent involvement in Diamond Dogs at some point. Because the game builds to a point where the first main antagonist, Skullface, who I think is one of the least inspired characters in the whole of the MGS series, is basically made irrelevant, Arc 3 would have added the much needed full stop on the game and allowed the ideas brought up in earlier segments to get the screen time the game was so obviously implying they were going to. Honestly, at the time of writing this review, I can't even remember what happens after Skullface is killed, up until the final cutscene. Either it was so boring, or it just wasn't that useful as a story arc, which speaks volumes about the loss of potential. If we compare this to Snake Eater's story finale, you defeat Volgin, the main antagonist, but you know there is still one loose end, the boss, which is addressed and concluded properly, and then the game makes you aware of how Snake and Eva lost the trail of Ocelot through a final segment. This is how the Phantom Pain plays out, except you defeat Skullface, end of. The other plots aren't really resolved. I doubt very much that Kojima wanted to end his title with such an abrupt and unfulfilling ending. Sure, it was an ending, but only really by definition. It failed to tie up so many loose ends, and the bits that I was most excited for, spoiler warning, when Eli steals Sahelanthropus, was never ended, and the ending we got was cliché and not even that good anyway. It really does reek of poor design decisions made by the highest executives who love money. Now, this next section will spoil the ending of the game, so if you haven't finished it already, please skip ahead to the timestamp in the description. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the game tries to pull this bait and switch thing, where it's revealed that you're not playing as Big Boss, but rather a nameless medic that the man himself trusts enough to assume his identity as a body double. Why though? I know that Big Boss's appearance in Guns of the Patriots may have been confusing continuity-wise for long-standing fans of the series, as he was killed in the original Metal Gear. But to be honest, given some of the stuff that Metal Gear has pulled over the years, having Big Boss just survive the original encounter would have been just fine. As the game was designed to show how Big Boss went from war hero to antagonist, creating a body double instead to fill the role of his story kind of misses the point. As it turns out, this man who had to execute his former mentor then watches a robotic version of said mentor walk slowly into the ocean, afterwards only to have the mercenary force he built up destroyed, leads to someone else being the evil man we know, while the real Big Boss hides away for many years. Why? Now, it feels like I've been slamming the game for the entire review, but it does deserve some praise. While it is a depart from the series, although you could argue that Snake Eater was the same, just a little more limited in terms of scope, the Phantom Pain's open world is something worthy of mention. While it can be pretty bare bones at times, it's not boring and allows you to just jump into random enemy bases whenever you feel like, or tackle missions from different angles thanks to the rather large mission boundaries. A lot of people seem to have some personal gripe with this, but to be honest, it's not that bad. Another thing that 5 gets right is the amount of weapons, vehicles and buddies that are available to you once they have been developed by the staff back at Mother Base, the main base of Diamond Dogs. These weapons make replaying missions interesting because again, they allow you to take them on in different ways depending on your preference. Some may prefer standard gunfights, some may prefer close-up stealth or far-away sniping, while others may just want to ram into everyone in a tank, and the game lets you. This is something I feel was really captured well in the Phantom Pain. It gives players a chance to add their own challenges. For example, I tried to defeat the Skulls in their main boss fight using only a weak pistol as a sort of challenge to myself. I briefly mentioned just now about buddies. They're a one-person addition to the mission loadout that you're allowed to take with you, and picking which ones you want to use for which missions really changes the dynamics. For example, Quiet, whom I've mentioned, is a sniper good at providing covering fire that can be used to take out some of the more dangerous looking opponents through the use of communication Big Boss has with her. I prefer to snipe with her, as it makes moving into the base much easier thereafter, with her picking off the last few enemies that have hidden behind cover due to her extreme manoeuvrability. Additionally, each character can be equipped with a set of weapons and armour that give them different abilities, such as non-lethal methods of dispatching mercenaries on the field. I think this is a nice addition, as it allows you to play to your personal strengths and weaknesses. Another point worth mentioning is the visual style of the, shall we say, less heroic cutscenes. Dimly lit, hazy, at odd angles, these brief moments really capture the confusion and anger of the characters involved. They're distinctly unique to other cutscenes in the game in terms of these aspects, and the moment they start, you know something bad is going to happen. Of course, it goes without saying that Kojima's story writing is again beautiful. The bits of the game that make sense are really engaging, and it's exactly what I'd want from a next-gen Metal Gear game set in the 1980s. It's also nice to see Ocelot as a friend for once. It really adds more depth to his character seeing him play the role of deuteragonist, along with Kaz. Metal Gear Solid The Phantom Pain, a game unfinished. It works well, and the ideas are interesting, but it can't hold up to other games in the series. As I've stated, I have a huge love-hate relationship with this game. I praise it for its well-formed gameplay, and slam it into the floor for its missing content, among other things. But I have to leave it with a score of 7 out of 10, and a good rating. For first-time comers with no outside knowledge, this game is going to be a blast. But for fans of the series, and storytelling in general, it's a missed opportunity that will forever leave a bad taste in the mouths of many. I'm Alex, and thanks for watching episode 9 of Retrospective. I'll catch you around. If you like this, you'll enjoy my previous episode on Shadow of the Colossus, a masterful, mysterious adventure to a cursed land fraught with danger. Check the link in the description, I'm sure you'll love it. Alright, I'll catch you in episode 10. Bye!